Hello everyone, my name is Sordy and this is part 2 of the Ultimate Trackmania guide. If you haven't watched the previous video about general driving skills like driving lines and transitions, be sure to check that out as I'm reusing some of those concepts in the video here. Today's episode will cover tech. Tech is a style that focuses on drifting on road. It was the original style for competitive play for many years, and even though nowadays the style for competition is mixed, tech is still very important to know for these kind of maps. So let's go into the track editor and take a look. Alright, so I've built this little track over here. 2 boosters, so you go quite fast into a shallow corner, into a very tight corner, into just a straight line to the finish. So let's see what we can do here. So let's try to apply the techniques we learned in last video to this track. So we go past here, we exit quite wide, we're over 9.9. Okay, maybe it was just not good. Let's try releasing a bit earlier, go wide. Okay, it was decent, it was okay. 9.6. But you can see that the amount of time we had to release was quite a lot. We had to release for multiple seconds, and it was still quite awkward to drive. So in corners like these, where you have to release a lot, try going for a drift. So we do the same thing, we entry very wide, but now we start a drift. I did some releasing in the turn as well to make sure I could make it, but you can see 9.1. That's already half a second faster than what we had earlier. Let's try again. Let's see what this ends up. 9.2. I have a lot of space on the exit there, but you can see just how much having a drift instead of a long release can help with getting better times. So let's take a look at how you actually perform these drifts and what you have to do to control them. Alright, I've created basically like a dummy road track, just a bunch of space so we can play around. And in the middle, one block is missing so we can drift around that. So how do you drift? Well, you drift by first accelerating until at least 190 speed. So we wait, now this is more than enough. Then you have to turn for a bit, about half a second, because you have to be fully steering in order to drift. And then you hold the brake. Then you'll see that your car will start to drift. So let's try to see what happens if we are not fast enough. So let's say we go around 180. You see that your car is now not drifting. This is also known as a nose slide, when you intend to drift, but it doesn't happen for whatever reason. So what happens if we are not, if we are too fast on the brake? Okay, so at this point we are going fast enough, but if you press brake too quickly, you also get a nose slide. So make sure that if you're drifting, first turn, then drift, then brake, I mean. Okay, and now you can see there are skip marks by my car. If I try to drift now, even though I am steering, I'm pressing the brake but nothing is happening. This is because we are already having skip marks and you cannot drift while you have skip marks behind you. So what you have to do here is you have to get rid of them. I accidentally did it there. Let's try to get them back right here. Just release the steering for a small bit, so your car goes straight, and then you can drift again. You can also counter steer. Yeah, if you steer the other way, you also get rid of them, as in the process you'll be getting your car straightened up and therefore losing your skip marks. Then you can drift again. Now what you also could see is that I can drift multiple times within a slide. Sliding is basically when you do have skip marks, but they do not overlap. You can see them not overlapping. I can just re-press my brake key and continue to drift if I see that my corner is not, or if I'm gonna hit a wall or something. Let's see, like this. So how do we put this into practice? So here we're back at the track again. As you can see, I go in here, There's still the one corner with the entry being here, the apex being here, and the exit being around here. So for drift like this, like tech turns, which are turns where you have to drift, is you start drifting as early as you can. This makes it so you can drift as little as possible, and that is the goal of tech turns, is make sure that you're drifting and releasing as little as possible to get through the turn. And you use that as similarly to release turns, is by using all of the track. So you start out wide, then hold the brake until your car faces the apex here, or around faces the apex, because of course as you release the brake, your car will start turning a lot more. So you aim around here, and if you drift at the right time, that means you would have just scraped past this corner and ended up here. So let's try that. So we go wide, we drift early, wait until our car faces the apex, and then we exit. Go again. Drift early, wait for the car to kind of face the apex, and then release the gas, release the brake. That's all you have to do. Make sure that you steer a lot before you actually do the drift, and you'll be good to go. So how do you know whether or not your tech turn was nice? Similarly to the release tactics, once again, see how much of the track you used. See how much in the entry and exit of space you have, and in the inside of the apex, see how much space you have there. So let's try to do one run here and see if I can analyze it. Alright, so that was a 9.0. If we take the Camp 7 here, it's too bad that our skip marks disappeared, but we started, I think, quite okay here. Steered in, hit the apex, but we still had some space left on the exit, so that's something we can improve. So there's two things where you can notice them. In your tech turns, you either overdrift or underdrift. Underdrift basically means not drifting enough, which usually means that you just hit the wall over here. And overdrifting is that you drift too much. So then you would end up like in the middle of the road. That means you overdrifted and you can drift less. Now usually it's better to have a drift and see if you underdrift and release accordingly than overdrifting. Overdrifting will cost you a lot of speed because you're pressing the brake, you have a lot of angle, this will make your car a lot slower. But if you are just about to hit this, you can release around this point, and then you're able to still end up around here and not lose too much speed. Now let's try to put this into a real track and see what we can do there. So here we are on summer 2021-21. I would like to give an example of the current campaign, although the current campaign only has one tech turn in the entire 25 tracks, so I'm gonna have to look back. So let's take a look at this track and see how you can determine where you have to drift and how much to drift and stuff like that. So let's just take this track as is without releasing or braking. See where we end up in the wall. Okay, there was one there. So you can see this this corner is just too tight for our car to go in full speed. But how do you determine where you should start your drift and exit your drift? Now you want to make your drift in such a way that you hit the apex and again exit somewhat wide. So around here, this will be the apex. It's the inside part of our corner. The entry will be around here. Now this is not necessarily where we start the drift, but this is like the outside part of the track that we want to use. And then here is after the drift. We want to make sure that we have as much speed as possible. Let's try doing that. So first, let's just see what happens to our drift if we start at the entry with our drift. Same start, and we only start here. Now we are able to make the corner with a lot of speed, but we had a very wide line. As you could see, our car went around here, while the apex is here. So we're losing time there. So then if we just drift earlier, say around here, our car still ends up very wide, but we're able to make this apex. So if you start your drift earlier, and because if you drift, your car has a less steering angle until you release the brake. You go here, then your car kind of gets wide, and at that point you can release the brake and hit the apex here. Now the difficult part is when you should drift, because as I showed you, I drifted earlier and I made the apex. But when exactly to start drifting is very difficult to teach, as it's mostly a thing of feeling, knowing what your car will do in certain situations. But what you can do is simply experiment with the corner. You know, start drifting here maybe, start drifting here, here. Just see what happens to your car when you start at different points and when you release at different points. So if you then apply the analyzing techniques, where you can see how much of the track you used in the entry, apex and exit, you can see how good your turn was. So next thing I want to talk about are drifts from transitions. As you can see here, we have quite a tight corner, and we could land straight and then drift, although you have very little space to do that. So what you can do is turn your car just before you have the transition, so your car lands in a slide. And as we learned, we are able to redrift if we are sliding. So you can hear, we're sliding, and we can keep pressing the brake to make our car drift more. So then you want to make sure that you end up in a slide. This could also be if you go from, for example, from dirt to grass, or for dirt or grass to road. So you have the same effect where you start sliding and then you tap the brake again. And then what you want to do is the same thing. Entry wide, take the apex, and then exit wide again. Like this. If you take it very tight, this will mean that you have to drift more to make the corner. As when you're drifting, you can see that your car has a very little steering angle. So you have to drift more to make sure that your car doesn't clip the inside, like this. Once again, you could also even use some air control. For example, we can do a brake tap here in the air brake, to make sure our car is aligned with the truck. And then do a couple of brake taps to make the corner while we're sliding. Now let's take a look at my run from back then and see what I could do better. Back with the Dutch car skin. Okay. Late drift, missed the apex. This is okay, we have used a lot of the space. Missed the apex, but we used a lot of the track on the exit, which is good. A lot of space left on that turn. Again, missed the apex, went a bit too wide, so we had to release even. This is very safe, we have a lot of space left on both the entry and the exit. Missed the apex by a mile there, which probably means that we drifted too late. Probably an overdrift there. We could make a corner with less drifting if we started earlier. Let's take a look at some of these corners again. So you can see exactly what I talked about happened here in my actual PB back then. I started my drift only about here, which made me completely miss the apex. And here, it was okay, we kept a lot of speed. We could have gone a little bit more to the inside here. So we could have released our gas earlier. So we had our steering angle earlier. And end up at the same place here. Now here I redrifted a lot. Let me actually put on my keyboard here. You see we drifted quite a lot there. And we could end up actually here, which would give us a lot more speed. And this one, we released the brake and we ended up very much to the right, even though if we look at the turn, we could probably go tighter here, which would make our exit actually here, all the way over here, because this will be the tighter part of the outside line. And here, a bit too much. Missed the apex again. Now this drift was very late. This is probably the part where I lose a lot of speed and a lot of time. I even had to release to make that corner. So if we started to drift around, let's see. If we started drifting maybe around here, maybe here. We had our steering angle earlier and we could make the apex there. And at the end, maybe our transition was a bit too aggressive, but it's okay. Now let's take a look at the tech god Karian and see what he does. Again, same full speed start. See how little he drifts? It still makes the apex like this. Exits very wide in order to get the most speed. Small release. Let's see if he actually brakes there or just uses the transition there. Yeah, so he just uses the transition here. You have this small bump. You can see him releasing here. So he uses the transition to start the drift, so a loss of grip. And then a small release in order to make the corner. Redrift in the slide. And as you can see, he goes very tight to the inside there and exit. Also very tight here, there, and then you can see he's almost hitting this wall right here. Does a small air brake to align his car with the surface below. In his line he doesn't even have to redrift. He goes wide enough that his car perfectly matches the corner and ends up very wide again to keep the most speed. Redrift here from transition. As you can see, I ended up very wide because I drifted too little, so I had an underdrift. My car was around here, and here it was basically hitting the wall. I have to exit there. Again, start a drift from the transition. Now this corner. Drifts earlier, hits the apex. Doesn't go too wide. Now the reason for this is because if you end up here, it might be more difficult to not gain any airtime here, because you can see it's slanted downwards. And then here, very close here, very wide exit into the finish. So you can see, even though I did not crash, I simply lost so much speed because of my missed exits and apexes. I drifted too much at some point because of that, which made me lose speed, which made me lose a lot of time. Especially in tracks like this, losing speed means that you're not snowballing your speed, and that already accounts for more than or almost 2 seconds on not even a minute of track. So if you implement these analyzing techniques and then with that optimize your lines, you'll be able to have some great tech tracks. Now, so far we've been talking about optimizing your lines, getting everything out of every corner. But that might not be the best thing to do in a round situation, such as in ranked. So let's go over some techniques to get your car through the tracks a bit safer. The first technique is just drifting more. If you're not sure if you can make the turn, just drift a bit more and you'll be fine. So again, I'm not sure if my car can make this turn. Just drift a bit more and you're good. Now if you were observant, you also saw that I released in the turn. This is also something you can do. If you, especially if you see that you drifted too late, you can very quickly, like maybe 100 milliseconds, just release the gas, and just this small release will very greatly impact your turning radius and your speed. So as you can see there, I started too late with my drift, so I have to release within the drift to compensate. Now with this, I am still pressing the brake. You can see, I'm still braking, I'm still turning, it's just the gas that I'm releasing. So again, oh no, I started too late, let's release a bit, and we can still make the corner quite nicely. So these two techniques are the two big ones you can use in tech corners in order to make the corner, even if you're not sure if you're going to make it and you just want to make sure that you're not crashing. Now, a small thing I want to mention specifically about sausage duck. So we're on summer 2021-13 here. This is the final turn of the track, and as you can see, the entire turn is just full sausage blocks. So normally your entry and exits will be like the exits, or the outsides of the block, like here. But because of this hill right here, because of the sausage, this completely changes your line. Because right now you want your entry to be here. This is basically the start of your drift, where you can either use a small bump here as a transition to start your drift, or you can of course still just press the brake. Then use this banking of the inside to give you more turning radius. And your exit has to be around the middle then as well. If your exit would be like here, you simply fly off the track and yeah, you have to respawn and you're big in the mud. We go here, as you can see, before I started the checkpoint I used the bump to start my drift, then redrift, use the inside, end up at the exit at the middle of the track. Now the final thing I want to explain are Neodrifts. Neodrift is an advanced way of drifting, which is a bit more difficult, but will allow you to drift in basically all circumstances. Even if you're below 190 speed, you do have to be still steering for like half a second, and you can even drift with skip marks. So how do you do this Neodrift? It's the same as a normal drift, although before you press brake, you release the steering for just a second, and then immediately you start braking afterwards. So in slow motion it would like this. I start here. So you're still steering and gassing. Then you release the gas. You quickly press the brake. And then you steer again. Let's do it again. We're turning. We're releasing our turn. Pressing the brake. And then turning again. If you do it in a quick succession, it will look like this. You can see I was able to drift at like 130 speed. We go again. Full steer, quickly release our turn, brake, and then full steer again. Now on keyboard this is relatively easy, as you have only 100% or 0% output. But for wheel especially will be very difficult, because getting your steering to neutral is what makes this work. Now you see I had a nose slide there, and that was because I wasn't steering enough before I started doing my Neodrift. You still want to make sure that you're fully steering before attempting a drift. This will never change. So that's all I wanted to explain about tech. All in all, focus on minimizing the time spent drifting by using all of the track possible, and also steering normally before the drift if possible, because steering normally will not cost you speed, while drifting will cost you speed. And once you get a feel of the car, tech is really one of the most satisfying styles to play while you're sliding throughout the track. Next episode, we'll be covering one of my favorite styles, full speed. Full speed is a style focused on keeping as much speed throughout the track as possible while going through loopings and wall rides. So see you next time.